What's going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FTN, right here on Game Plus Network. Thanks, as always, for taking the time to hang out, following along on my Twitter stream, at Chris Meaney. If you have any questions, I'll keep an eye on things. Got producer Tino keeping an eye as well. If you do have any questions at all throughout this show, because I want to address you if you do have any starter sit questions. It is just Thursday right now, but you may have a couple questions when it comes to Saquon Barkley. That's right. Today, we're going to see some football. It's Giants and Washington here. The New York Football Giants and the Washington Football Team. NFC East rivals going toe-to-toe here today. We got Gilles Gallant of FTN. He's going to stop by in a little bit. He is the touchdown prop king. We're going to talk about some of his favorite props and an early look at maybe just week 2 on Sunday. There's not a lot of touchdown props just up yet at books for Sunday, but we can get a feel just of what Jill's thinking, myself, just where we could go and where the points may come from, maybe some underdogs on the money line, because he is the king of underdogs as well. He's got a couple shows over at Bets TV, Dog Day Afternoon and Touchdown Town, which you can catch on Tuesdays and on Sundays before kickoff. We are going to address a couple start and sits on this show that I have for the weekend, as well as a couple of DFS plays, and I got a couple props here for you this evening as well, and we'll run through some news and notes. And at the end of the show, we didn't get to it yesterday, we will talk about the World Series odds. It's really soon. We're just a couple weeks away from the bright lights of October. And I mentioned Vlad Guerrero Jr. at 15-1. Before I came on, I just double checked. He's now 8-1. Like, those odds are, but every day that goes by, it's just the odds are increasing in favor of Vlad. I still think it's Shohei's award to win, but I don't know, man. I think Vlad's closing the gap here just a little bit. He's had a strong August and September, and Shohei's starting to cool off just a little bit. But I do, like I said yesterday, I do believe it is his award. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about tonight's game before we bring in Mr. Gallant. Washington, 3.5-point favorites here. The total at 40.5 on the money line, minus 165 using the parlay calculator and prop shop. Absolutely free over at ftnbets.com. You get the best possible odds possible. Like, say that 4 or 5 times in a row. Don't shop around. Just go to ftnbets.com, type in anybody you want in the prop shop, and you will see the player come up and all the books there listed, and you get the best possible odds. Same thing with the parlay calculator. It'll help you just maximize your opportunity to win some cash here. So this is what I'm seeing, minus 165 for Washington and plus 152 for the Giants and 40.5 the total here. I do want to just talk about Daniel Jones for a second. And I was digging up some stats. He's 4-0 against Washington. Tino came on yesterday and we talked about that. 68% completion rate, 7.2 yards per attempt, 8 touchdowns, just 3 picks. This is a guy who has 40 turnovers in like 28 games, but against Washington, 8-3, the touchdown interception ratio, 100 passer rating. Against everybody else in the league, he's 4-19, 61% completion rate, 6.5 per attempt, 28-18 touchdown interception ratio, and 81.9 passer rating. That's like night and day. I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like it's a lock that the Giants are going to go in and win, but maybe this is just a team that he feels comfortable playing, which is strange because it's a really good defense. I think Washington wins the game today, but I do believe that the Giants cover. I think this is a field goal game, and I'm not on the total, but if I had to pick a side, it would be the under. This is what I'm feeling for props here today, and we'll get into everything Saquon related here in just a couple minutes. Logan Thomas, over 4.5 grabs, minus 105 at BetMGM. And then Sterling Shepard, over 55.5 receiving yards. It's plus 100 at Caesars. Now, he has jumped up. Actually, he's jumped up. Yesterday we talked about his 4.5 catches, and it was really juiced to the over at minus 150. It was not for me. But now you can get plus 100 over 5.5 grabs, which I like. And his yards has actually jumped up before we came on in some books to 59. I think he gets over 60. I would bet it as high as 64.5. If it creeps up to that number, I would bet the over on that. I'm comfortable taking the plus money at 5.5 catches. And I like Logan Thomas over 4.5. I'd go as high as minus 130. If it gets past 130, I mean, too late. Probably you missed it there. I'll start with Thomas. In 2 games with Taylor Heineke last season, actually it was 1.5, because I went back and I looked at the game where he took over Dwayne Haskins, and I looked at the plays between both quarterbacks and the tight ends just to make sure, because yesterday we talked about over 150 yards in 2 games with Heineke. It's just 1.5. So in 1.5 games with Taylor, he's got 13 targets, 10 grabs, 145 yards. In the playoff game against the Bucks, he had 9 targets, 5 grabs, and 75 yards. This is a good matchup, too, against the Giants. They allowed the 12th most receiving yards to tight ends last season. There was a string of 5 or 6 years where it was an automatic play at tight end against the Giants. They have cleaned it up over the past couple of years, but it's still a pretty good spot for Logan Thomas. And you got to think, like McLaurin, they can move him around a little bit, but really good corners in New York. I think Thomas will be Heineke's go-to guy here today. And then as for Shepard, he's coming off a big game. He's my favorite Giants wide receiver altogether. No disrespect to Kenny Golladay. Tino brought up some really good points yesterday when it comes to Kenny Golladay. But Sterling Shepard has been kind of the safety valve for Daniel Jones since he's been into the league, and he has a solidified role in the slot. A couple years ago, they were moving him on the outside, and it didn't really work out. In the slot is where he belongs. And in week 1, he had 9 targets, 7 grabs, 113 yards, and a touchdown. And last week, when the Chargers played Washington, Keenan Allen absolutely had his way against Darryl Roberts in the slot. It was a great matchup. This one, a great matchup as well. You attack Washington in the slot. So we know that Jones likes to throw to Shepard in the slot, and we know that Washington struggles against wideouts in the slot. Keenan Allen last week, 13 targets, 9 catches, 100 yards. So a pretty good spot for both of these guys. And if you are subscribed over at Bet365, you have an account over there, they have a new, bet builder, which is pretty cool. It's like what Elliot Chris has been doing, the same game parlays, which I absolutely love because it all correlates together. Like, as an example here, this is what I have. And also they're giving out free $20 bets. So I put one together here, a $20 bet builder over at Bet365. The return is, it's 1,000 plus 1,000, 220 return on a $20 bet. It's just 4 guys I have here. Shepard, actually 5 bets. Shepard, the over 5.5 catches, the over 59.5 receiving yards. Thomas, over 4.5 catches, over 47.5 receiving yards. So again, it kind of correlates. I feel like if these guys get 5 and 6 catches, they're most likely going to be right around that receiving yard mark. And then I added Antonio Gibson in there, over 15.5 rushing attempts. He was a full go at practice. He was dealing with a shoulder injury. He was a full go. This guy got basically all the usage in the game in week 1 against the Chargers. He had 20 rushing attempts. The offense is going to run through him. J.D. McKissic probably will catch a couple balls. He certainly could, especially inside the red zone. But Antonio Gibson is going to be a guy that I think racks up a few rushing attempts. I think he could get to that 18 to 20 mark again. So if you are indeed signed up at Bet365, and if you're not, make it count. You're going to get a free $20 to have one of these bet builders for tonight. They're pretty fun. Let's talk about Saquon quickly before we bring in Gilles. Saquon, according to Dan Duggan of The Athletic, says, quote, "It's unlikely that the Giants are going to totally unleash Saquon Barkley." You like those quotes? They're kind of soft, but nonetheless, I agree with him. I do agree with him. Right? He's coming off that significant knee injury, and he wasn't full go in week 1, and then it's a short turnaround here. So I do believe he will be limited. I want to get Tino's thoughts here in a little bit. I have him as RB33. That may be a little unfair, but I'm nervous to play him. I know you spent that draft capital on him. It all depends on your situation, of course, but these are some running backs that will roll out ahead of him. Miles Sanders, Myles Gaskin, Devin Singletary. And I know that we don't know if Zach Moss is going to be active or not. I'm willing to roll the dice. I don't love that one. Clearly, Barkley has more upside, but I'm willing to roll the dice on Singletary. Kareem Hunt against Houston. Elijah Mitchell against Philly. Shanahan may do a couple weird things, but I'm willing to go with Elijah Mitchell here in this spot. Damian Harris. DeAndre Swift, of course. Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is a back that I think I would play. Forget the revenge narrative. That's fun. It's always fun. It has nothing to do with him playing his former team in the Packers. It's the usage that he had on the ground and through the air with Jared Goff. Both Denver backs. Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams. I'd play both of them over Saquon as well. Good spots for both backs against Jacksonville. Let's bring in Tino here. Tino, what are you thinking here for Saquon? Am I crazy? The Singletary one may be out there, but what do you feel like is a fair line projection-wise for Saquon here tonight against Washington?
Meaney, you told me to come on the show, and I wish I had confidence in my answers here. I don't have an answer for you that's gonna go against any of your points. Do I think 30 is a bit low? Yeah. In some situations, I am still starting Saquon. He naturally goes off against Washington. as soon as we got off the show yesterday, that little bubble came out. I saw the sleeper notification that he won't be unleashed. But I left this show telling you, if they are not going to play him 100%, do not play him. What bothers me the most is that I can't find the middle ground here. I can't tell if this is all a smokescreen, if they're really not giving him more than 11 touches this game. Like, I don't know what the issue would be to get him 15 to 18 touches. If I can get Saquon to 15 and 18 touches, I feel confident sending him out there, because I told you I'd rather cut down on the carries and get him those receptions. If Saquon can get 4 to 5 receptions here, my goal, my optimistic, this is like best case scenario for Saquon, 4 to 5 receptions, 40 to 50 receiving yards. Maybe he falls into the end zone and he gets a handful of carries and he figures it out from there. I think he can have a double-digit fantasy day. But, like, when they say they're not going to unleash him, it's one thing. But if they're going to give him 10 carries to run into the offensive line again, I mean, yeah, RB30 might be generous. Seriously, I mean, his week last week was terrible. He wasn't even out there. So, I mean, my projection and the way I think this thing's going to go is he gets active in the reception game. But, you know, to tie it, and I'll place a bet real quick for you, this is what I said. One of my favorite plays in terms of props is Danny Jones over 20.5 rushing yards, because if everyone's this negative on Saquon in the rushing attack, that's fine. But they're going to have to get that going somehow. And the Giants were 0-5 when they played Washington last year. Jason Garrett finally woke up and started setting up design runs for Danny. He had 7 carries for 75 yards, give or take a few off the top, but it was over 70. If Saquon's not the guy and you really want to do an emotional hedge and you're starting Saquon, bet Danny's over on rushing, because one of those two things got to happen. Something's got to give here in the running game, and if it's not Saquon, I'd expect a really big fantasy day from Danny, because I just don't see how you're going to go through this game and just do nothing. Like, you know what I mean? If Saquon doesn't do it and Danny doesn't do it, who's going to score? You know, who's going to gain yards? So, yeah, man, the reception game is where I think Saquon would get the most pay dirt today. But I'm not optimistic in the rushing game. So, I mean, you're justified, man. You're justified. I'm as confused as you are.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's certainly a risk. I mean, drafting him was a risk. You knew it was a high risk, high reward. You know his upside. If you told me that he was going to get 15 touches and 5 of them would be catches, then I'm thinking about him certainly over a Singletary. But I still think, I'm in on Jamal Williams and both Denver backs. I mean, it's totally up to you how much risk you want to take. Obviously, I mean, it's your team. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I've had a couple Saquon versus Tyson Williams questions. I mean, the upside clearly lies with Saquon. It's just the risk and all about the context that you want to take. Me personally, I don't think I want to take that risk. Like, he just didn't do much for you in week 1. The backs that I listed, maybe just throw out Singletary and take the upside in Saquon. But the backs that I listed, the Gaskin, Sanders, Harris, Swift, Jamal Williams, both Denver backs, I think these are backs that I would rather play than Saquon. Again, it's totally a tough decision, but you mentioned the offensive line as well. I mean, not doing him any favors at all. A couple news items before we get out of here. Devonta Freeman promoted to the practice squad in Baltimore. 4 backs in the mix is what Harbaugh says, including Williams, Murray, and Lev Bell. Going to be an absolute mess. DeMarcus Lawrence out indefinitely with a broken foot. My goodness, Dallas defense is going to be it's not going to be great again this year, unfortunately. Trent Cannon, who was with Baltimore, the 49ers picked him up off waivers. It's another running back inside the 49ers backfield. Josh Jacobs sidelined yesterday. You mentioned the sleeper notification. I got one too that said brackets everything for Josh Jacobs. I think it's his toe, which is why he was sidelined. This is another guy that I'm very questionable about starting this week. Brendan Ayuk was a full go yesterday. Wouldn't start him, but at least he's a full go. Zach Ertz, hamstring, sideline Wednesday. If he didn't play, you could feel really good about Dallas Goedert. And then Gabriel Davis dealing with an ankle injury. He didn't play at practice yesterday. But again, tomorrow is the big day for some of these reports. If they don't practice on a Friday, you need to find backup replacements. Odell Beckham Jr. not going to play this week. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more in a little bit. But let's bring in Gilles Gallant. We'll take a little bit of a time out here. We'll preview more on tonight's game and get his thoughts, maybe what he's thinking on Saquon, and we'll get a few touchdown props out of him as well. Keep her locked. Mean Streets continues right here on Game Plus Network. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on a Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here with you. Thanks as always for taking the time to hang out on this Thursday. We're just hours away from Washington and New York. One of these teams got to get a W. I don't know. Maybe they'll tie. It would be fitting for these two teams to tie. We got Gilles Gallant in here of FTN Dog 5000 on the Twitter machine. Also the host of Dog Day Afternoon over at Bets TV and Touchdown Town, which you can catch on Tuesdays and Sunday morning before kickoff. Welcome in, Gilles. As always, you're going to be here with me on Thursdays, helping us win some cash. What's up, man?
Absolutely, Meaney. It's always good to join the Mean Streets on every Thursday and share my touchdown score plays, maybe give a little bit more reasoning because I always like to post the videos of what my touchdown scores are, but I got to be pretty quick. So this allows me an opportunity to give a little peek behind the curtain on a little bit more details on why I came to my conclusions.
And last week you crushed it. Like, we were talking about the games, and then we also did a little bit of a look ahead, which we will as well. Now there's no odds, but like you said, we'll do maybe just what you're feeling and, potentially some money line. I saw you tweet out there to the fans, which I appreciate, to get a few more viewers. Always respect that. But you called Christian Kirk last week, dude.
Christian Kirk, baby.
Yo, baby, let's go. He didn't not only did he find the end zone once, he found the end zone twice.
Yeah, and that's his MO, right? Like, usually he's the type of receiver that will explode. He had 2 games last year where he had 2 touchdowns or more. And, he had a stretch there where he had 6 touchdowns in 5 games. Like, when he's on, he's on. And I've seen Kyler look for him quite a bit. Now, obviously, when A.J. Green came in and Rondale Moore coming in, a lot of people thought that those targets were going to get eaten up. And they kind of did. But at the same time, you saw just against that Titans defense how you exploit them is over the top, and that's exactly what he did. Not only that, I think I also had, he was on Touchdown Town as well. I had Jarvis Landry, I think I gave out last week on the show, and Kyler Murray, obviously, at plus 130. I thought that one was just a lock.
Yeah, Kyler is so fun.
So
okay, so tonight, yeah, he is so good. He's my favorite player in the NFL. And I'm not I talk about him way too much. Just it's nice to hear somebody else say that they love him as much. Okay, so Washington 3.5 point favorites here. The total at 40.5. This is a fantasy thing on the side. Saquon, if you owned him, would you play him? You spent the high capital on him. Are you just rolling him out there here tonight?
I think you have to. If you've drafted him, more than likely you got to him probably somewhere near the midway through the first round, maybe to midway through the second round, depending on the type of league and settings that you have. But I think it would be foolish not to at least start him because they haven't shied away with saying that he's going to play or that he's not going to get reps. But I think the one thing is that really what's your better option? Like, if you're not starting him, you're more than likely starting a guy that's coming off the bench that you probably drafted in the 7th or 8th round. If you have that type of depth, kudos to you. But he's the type of player, like, they're going to force feed him at the goal line because you can't keep giving it to Daniel Jones at the goal line just because of his fumbleitis. And I think with him, I think really what you're banking on is that he's going to get 15 to 20 carries. I'm not really sure the game script will play out like that, but I still think he's such a home run threat that he could just run off for a 45-yard touchdown. I mean, this isn't the Penn State Saquon that we're used to, but at the same time, I don't really think anybody who has taken him in their fantasy leagues really has another option.
Yeah, it's a good point. And the upside is tremendous that he can bust one and then, on your bench in those points, there's nothing worse than that, actually. Like benching a stud and then seeing him, maybe even if he struggles on the ground and he's not efficient, which he wasn't in week 1 and he wasn't the first couple of weeks of last season, especially week 1 before he suffered that injury, that if he just gets a couple goal line carries that he converts into touchdowns with the landscape of running backs in fantasy, that would be a tough pill to swallow. Okay, let's focus on tonight and touchdown props. And if anybody has any questions, you're following along here on my Twitter account on the stream, please feel free to leave them and I can relate them here to Gilles and we can get to those questions. What are you thinking here tonight? Start us off.
Yeah, I think the first one, I think it's quite obvious, and I'm surprised that more people aren't on him for this tonight. I love Sterling Shepard at plus 250. You can get that at FanDuel right now. He led the team in red zone targets last season. Now, obviously, they brought Kenny Golladay in, but Kenny Golladay is at less odds than him at most books. Like, he's probably around the plus 180, maybe plus 170 range, and I don't buy that. I really think Shepard is right now the guy to play. No Evan Ingram tonight, so that means Shepard's going to probably be lining up in the slot even more. I think these odds are right in the sweet spot at plus 250. You know, I've seen some books where it's down to plus 225. I'd still play it at that. I even love his receptions prop. It's set at it's 5.5. And I think the over is plus 120. I played that today. I posted that with Dog of the Day at FTM Bets.
Yeah, I'm in on that one too. Yesterday when we talked about it on the show, it was really juiced to the over, like minus 160. I think, Tino, we both said, let's just wait 24 hours and it'll be plus money at 5.5. A really strong spot here against Darryl Roberts in the slot, who allowed 9 catches on 100 yards last week to Keenan Allen. I know Keenan Allen is a beast, but Shepard has proven to be the number one option really for Daniel Jones over the past couple of seasons. All right, I love that one. I have a feeling I'll like your next two as well. But last week we did defenses. Dude, you almost had it a couple times. There were a couple crazy plays in that game. There was that turnover just on Tampa's 10 when Fournette, it tipped off his hands. That one could have been then. And then there was another one where I believe it was Tampa who ran it back a majority of the field and then got stopped or in around, the 18-yard line, I think, of Dallas.
Mickens returning it, and he got pulled down probably around the 20, 25-yard line. Had one guy to beat. And, so that one is
going back to
just – that one, we played that last week. We lost out on it. It was obviously kicking the side. But, we're going to do it again. Defensive special teams touchdown, plus 225. That's at Bet365 right now. And I mean, you tweeted this out just on Sunday during the Giants game. It's no secret. Daniel Jones, 40 turnovers in 28 games. The only way that you're going to be able to pull this off from a defensive standpoint is you need turnovers to be generated. And Daniel Jones is a cash cow. Really, I think both teams' kick returners were pretty good in week one. They averaged nearly 30 yards per return. Really just have to break one tackle to kind of get to the end zone. So I like the chances there. And really, bad things happen to bad teams. Like, I'm not really sold on Washington's renaissance here, especially the Taylor Heineke renaissance that we've been kind of exposed to over the last few days. So I think defensive special teams touchdown, I think that's one of the better bets that you can make at plus 225. I just think there's going to be some shenanigans tonight. And I think especially with a low scoring game like this, everybody's going to be gearing so hard towards what the offenses are going to do. But a lot of the time, these points, sometimes they just get backdoored and generated on a last-second touchdown just because of a pick six in their own end or something along those lines. At these odds, I think it's a great spot.
I think it's a fantastic spot, too. I think we're certainly going to see a couple turnovers here.
I was going to say as well that the in-game turnovers, that's one of the things that I'm really huge on. And I am definitely, this is one of the first games in probably a little over a year, because it wasn't really there last year, where you had 2 quarterbacks that are kind of unproven or just turnover prone. So I'm thinking tonight I could probably in-game turnover props on both sides, because usually my strategy is I always love to do one side at a time and just kind of hammer and do all 4 of their drives for maybe the first quarter going into the second quarter. But this one I'm going to be busy in-gaming probably both sides right up until halftime.
I absolutely love it. You're a fantastic follower for multiple reasons. I'm sure you've paid the bills for a lot of your followers over the past couple of years, but your in-game turnover and touchdown props, dude, I've seen you hit multiple times where it's you tweet it and then all of a sudden it's the next 2 plays, it's boom, how the heck did he do that? So
I tweeted out during the commercial break too.
Yeah.
I tweeted out during the commercial break because in-game betting, commercial breaks are the lifeblood of anybody who wants to do in-game betting, and football is completely geared for that. So that's the best time to do it. So I always tweet it out during the commercial break, and then people, hopefully they can, if they already know what I was doing from a strategy standpoint, they know to tail too.
Absolutely. Make sure you're following Gilles on Twitter at GDog5000. All right, you got one more for us?
Yeah, one more. This one is just a mispriced line. I'm surprised that it's this high. J.D. McKissick at plus 500 score an anytime touchdown at BetMGM. Wow. To me, I feel like this is an overreaction, because obviously you look at the week 1 usage, he barely got on the field. He had 1 carry, I believe, 1 catch, maybe 1 target. And it's easy to look at one game and make a snap judgment, but I'm not going to ignore his production last year. 80 catches out of the backfield. For the second half of the season, it was Antonio Gibson's season, but a lot of people kind of remembered, at least I did, betting on touchdown props, that he was the guy to kind of look at, especially in the plus 225 to plus 250 range of what he was doing last year. He's 3rd in red zone targets, and he was 2nd in red zone rushing attempts last year for that team. If this was plus 300, maybe I'd give it a little pause. I'd be a little more hesitant, but at plus 500, man, giddy up.
Yeah, for sure. And again, with Heineke, right? He doesn't have a lot of experience. There could be a couple of dump offs, a couple check downs, and especially if the Giants, take away Terry McLaurin, which is very, very possible in this game. We could see at times both running backs on the field at the same time. I love it, dude. I absolutely love it. We're starting to get some questions. It's not, this is a fantasy question from John Patrick Souter. He says Shepard or Marvin Jones. I think we both like Shepard here tonight so much that we can't go against Shepard. It's going to be a big game. Get Shepard in your fantasy lineups. Sprinkle, anytime touchdown, over catches, over yards. We're all in on Shepard today. Gilles, always a pleasure. Stick around for one more segment, dude. We'll have a quick little look at week 2 and see what you're thinking. I know the odds aren't out, but we'll get your thoughts because, like you said, Landry and Christian Kirk. Oh, dude, you crushed it. So we got to kill it. We'll go.
Let's go.
Let's keep the streak going all year, right?
Let's
keep
go.
the streak going all year. Let's go. Keep her locked. One more segment here with Gilles on Mean Streets. Chris Meaney and Gilles Gallant here with you, talking Thursday Night Football just a little bit, and we're going to switch gears and a little preview for this weekend, some action and who Mr. Gallant's feeling here. It's some touchdown props, where they're going to come from. I didn't really get a side. Do you have a strong feel on this game at all? Like, we talked up the top of the show and just in the break here with Tino and running the show for us, who's a big Giants guy, and Jones is 4-0 against Washington. Does he make it 5-0 or is?
Well, and that's the problem, is that I just said that if you're going to bet a side in this game, you take Giants money line, because it's more of a coin flip, I think, than people are realizing. I think people are maybe giving a little too much credit to Taylor Heineke for how he looked against Tampa last year. I don't really think he's that great of a quarterback. Mind you, I don't think Daniel Jones is that great of a quarterback. But at the same time, if those positions are both even, getting 3 points at home, like I think it should be maybe closer to a pick 'em. But at the same time, I obviously know why odds makers make a spread the way that they do. So I think really, if you're going to bet the game, you have to take Giants money line. Otherwise, it's a pass for me.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there too. I've heard that way too much over the past few days that Tyler Heineke went toe to toe with Tom Brady last year in the playoffs. Like I heard that way too many times. I don't want to hear it anymore. Like, come on. Like the defense held him in and he was okay. Right? That's what I took away from that playoff game.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that, Tampa had maybe just minimal footage to be able to dissect and see kind of what his tendencies are going into that playoff game. I think that it's a little bit blown out of proportion. It's the same reason why I didn't bet his touchdown prop, because right now he's sitting at plus 300 to score a touchdown in this game. Off of what? Like just because he did that against Tampa. And last year when I bet him, because I actually hit that touchdown prop last year for the playoffs, it was at plus 1,200. How do you go from plus 1,200 to plus 300 off of one performance? I know that the Giants' rush defense is not even comparable to the Buccaneers, but come on, like it's too much. It's too much of a swing. I just think that maybe we need to pump the brakes on the Taylor Heineke Washington football team renaissance here.
Yeah, I mean, just take J.D. McKissick, right, at plus 500. Okay, so you are the king of the dogs, of course, Dog Day Afternoon, and you're writing articles constantly over at FCNbets.com. Do you have a dog that you're looking at for this weekend?
I got two, and I'll be honest with you, I did not make this pick based on the fact that I was coming on your show. I genuinely love the Eagles money line this weekend against the Niners. I got them a couple of days ago at plus 160 money line. They're down to plus 145. I think the Niners, they're not as strong as people realize. I think that defense, I think a lot of people, we get wrapped up with Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, and we're not looking at the secondary and how the Lions picked them apart all through the fourth quarter in that game. There's a ton of San Francisco injuries coming through. The Eagles O-line, obviously, Mailata, obviously is the highlight of all offensive linemen right now in football, and the Eagles O-line just looked really strong. So I think they're going to be able to neutralize that pass rush. And I'm also going to be monitoring a Jalen Hurts touchdown prop, because if it's above plus 300, Meaney, I think it's an auto bet for Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, Mailata, that play was phenomenal. He's an Australian rugby player a few years ago, and he looked like a former rugby player on that play. He absolutely crushed the defensive back in Atlanta. I mean, Jalen Hurts, why not? The fact that he has had at least 60 rushing yards in 4 of his 5 starts, and the 5th one came against Washington in Week 17 where he didn't start. I mean, the offensive line looks really, really strong, and it will be the Eagles' strong point this season. There's a lot of holes still on that team, and I want to get carried away the fact that they beat the Falcons, but the offensive line played really well. And the Niners, yeah, I do believe what you said. I think they're a little overrated. I think they were coming into the season too. Like their win total was at over 10.5. They were favored to win the division. The Rams are awesome. How are they favored to win the division? And Seattle's in there, and Arizona is clearly good as well. So it's a very tough division, obviously. But I think the 49ers team is a little bit overrated. I don't know what the deal is. Like, I get they had a lot of pieces coming back on defense, but I mean, Jimmy G, right? I mean, eventually they're going to make the quarterback switch, and then they're going to have a rookie in there, and that's not a lock.
And again, I just think that it's based on what we're seeing. Like, I just don't think that the Eagles should be home underdogs in this scenario. So it's kind of more of an odds play as well. Especially, and again, I'm like you, I don't want to get too caught up in week one, what they did to a Falcons team that is probably going to finish with a bottom 5 team maybe by the end of the year. But I just look at the way that they play offense and look at the way that their receivers like Devontae Smith and Jalen Reagor looked phenomenal in week 1. And I think that they're going to be able to exploit the Niners defense. And then, of course, just if we're trailing in that position, I really like the Eagles to still be able to move the ball down the field. And again, just a lot of these injuries as well for the Niners, like especially in the run game, it doesn't really seem to matter because it seems like it's almost like plug and play in Shanahan's system. But again, attrition just takes a toll after a while. And I really think that this is a matchup, that they can be beat. And I think people might be a little shocked at that result.
Raheem Mostert done for the season officially, and Jason Verrett, one of their top corners, also done for the season. So a couple big injuries to the Niners, and yeah, they had like a 24-point lead with like 3 minutes left. I sweated that out. I had him in Survivor, I had him cover 7.5. I was like, what is happening? If I lose this bet, I'm absolutely crushed.
Oh, no.
All right, what else do you got for us? One more here before we get you.
All right, this one is probably a little more off base. I don't feel as confident about the Eagles money line. I like the Dolphins money line at home. Again, a plus 150 on home underdog. And I think this could be a real big letdown spot for Buffalo. The Dolphins secondary, they're not going to get gouged the way that, some of these teams that Buffalo has done all the way they did last year, because Buffalo, they're known for spreading out every wide receiver wide, nobody in the backfield, having Josh Allen by himself, and just kind of slowly picking apart defenses. And I really think that actually plays into the Dolphins' hands from a secondary standpoint, a defensive standpoint. Plus the fact, they're going to go down to that Miami Heat. And I think that's going to play a huge role with like the way that the game goes by the time we get to the third and fourth quarter, guys getting a little tired. I'm not really sure that Buffalo can win this game. I think Buffalo is a good team. I think they might will end up winning the AFC East, even if they went 0-2. But I just think in this spot, divisional game going into Miami, this is the spot that you want to take the Dolphins.
And Miami's defense pretty strong. I mean, last year they played pretty good as well. I don't think it's as good as Pittsburgh, but Buffalo, the offense was not rolling last week. And I know it's just one game and we don't want to overreact, but they weren't in sync last week and they have no run game. And that's my one issue with that team. Like, yeah, they can, like Josh Allen can throw the ball and they can score points, but you need to have some sort of balance. You have to. And I just think they have to try to establish a run a little bit so that they can cook on offense on all cylinders. Man, always a pleasure. Why don't you plug some of the stuff that you're doing right now before you get out of here?
Yeah, so I've got, like you said off the start of the show, I've got 2 shows every week now. Every Sunday at 11 Eastern, we're going to be doing Touchdown Town, where I give you my 5 best touchdown picks for 1 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Eastern games. That airs on Bets TV, or you can watch it on Twitter as well. I'll make sure to share it. And then every Tuesday, take a little lighter side a look at the betting of NFL and some of the different betting markets in the world. And I'll bring in a special guest of some of the fun betting contemporaries that I have here in the gambling Twitter space. And that's called Dog Day Afternoon. And that airs every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Exciting times, man. I always appreciate your time. I love chopping it up with you. Good luck this weekend. Have fun tonight. And make sure you are following Gilles Gallant on Twitter, GDog5000. You don't want to miss out on those in-game touchdown props. Always a pleasure, sir. Keep her locked here on Main Streets. We're going to talk start and sit, and I got a couple DFS plays for you as well. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here with you. Going to switch gears and talk a little start and sit. If you have any questions, as always, you can reach out at Chris Meaney. This video will be up on our YouTube page, and I'll circle back before kickoff and answer any of those questions. I will have a start and sit column over at ftnfantasy.com, which will be out here today. So this is what I'm thinking for starts. And I try not to be obvious here, like with studs. Like start Kyler Murray. Start Joe Burrow. Like I try to be a little bit different of just in deeper leagues, maybe players that you're just wondering about if they're on the bubble or whatnot. Big Ben, for example. Big Ben I had last week as quarterback 29. There was no way in heck this guy would have touched my starting roster at a game in Buffalo. Now, the home opener against the Las Vegas Raiders, you can dial him up. I think he's a top 15 quarterback. It's a pretty good spot. Chase Claypool, down game last week. You can dial him up. Juju, these guys are going to perform. Deontay, always a must start. You play him. Najee Harris, you play everybody in Pittsburgh this week. Maybe not the tight ends, but you play everybody else. Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams on here. Jarvis Landry, Tim Patrick, Cole Kmet, and the Arizona defense. Now, not breaking any news, the Arizona defense played really good last week, but they were a defense that was hanging around waiver wires. They were getting undrafted. The secondary, a lot of holes, still a lot of holes on the secondary, but the way that they dialed up pressure with Chandler Jones, who had 5 sacks and 3 in the first quarter, and J.J. Watt on that roster now too. He still has something to offer. Clearly, I think you can get at Kirk Cousins, you can get at that offensive line in Minnesota. You dial them up. Both Denver backs I mentioned earlier when I was just comparing, would you play them over Saquon? I think you could just play both backs. Now, you don't want to have both of them on your roster, and I don't think that that's going to be a case across most fantasy teams. You have one or the other. You're unsure about Javonte Williams because I've noticed in Yahoo leagues over the past 24 hours, his ownership has dropped. So he's actually getting cut and dropped because Melvin Gordon had this 70-yard touchdown run, which he took it to the house late in the game against the Giants, but the snap count was dead even. More touches, more carries for Williams. He closed out the game. I thought he looked pretty good. The thing with Gordon is he's not going to go away. We don't really know fully who the official goal line back will be. Melvin Gordon has a lot of success being the goal line back. His rookie season, he had 0 touchdowns. After that, this is a guy who's getting 7-8 per year, at least, and a big player inside the red zone. But the thing with Gordon is he caught 3 passes. He had 3 targets, 3 catches for 17 yards. He was a big player in the passing game last season when he took over for Phillip Lindsay. Williams had 1 catch, but it was for -4 yards. The point is, a good spot here against Jacksonville. You can play both of these guys. Jarvis Landry last week, 5 targets, 5 grabs, and 71 yards. This is just a really good spot against the Houston Texans, and Odell Beckham Jr. is already ruled out of this game. Deep sleeper, Anthony Schwartz. Anthony Schwartz, 3rd in ADOT among wide receivers with 3 targets last week. He had 5, just shy of 70 yards receiving. I like the over on his catch prop at 2.5. I like the over on, actually, scratch that. I don't love the over on his catch prop, but I like the over on his yards, 25.5. I believe a couple over at ftnbets.com in our bet tracker. I believe Noah has over longest reception at 16.5. He's the deep threat guy in this offense. He wasn't playing as much as Donovan Peoples-Jones, who could be another sleeper this week, but the deep threat guy in the offense to stretch the field. This is exactly what Cleveland needed when they drafted Schwartz this past year. Tim Patrick, just a good spot as well. Against Jacksonville, he had 4 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown. He had 3 100-yard games last season and 8 games where he had at least 40 yards. And we know that Jerry Jeudy is not going to play in this game. Tim Patrick, stock up. Here are some players that, I got to touch on Kmet just quickly for a second. 8 targets, 6 catches, 79 yards in his first 6 games last year as a rookie. His next 5 games, oh my goodness. He had 30 targets, 20 catches, and 149 yards. His final 5 games, that is, last season. At least 37 yards in 3 of the final 5. This guy was a big part of the offense in week 1. He had 6 targets, 5 catches, 2nd-round pick. He's super talented. 42 yards for him last week on 7 targets. I'm all over the place with Cole Kmet. I like him that much. But I just think he's a big part of the offense moving forward. And I think that Andy Dalton is good for his game. Here are a couple players that I would sit. Trevor Lawrence, Josh Jacobs, Mark Ingram, Michael Pittman Jr., Will Fuller, his very first game against the Bills, Mike Gesicki against the Bills, 3 targets, 0 catches. Durham Smythe played more than him, 17 more snaps than Gesicki. Gesicki's in trouble. And then Baltimore defense that would sit against the Chiefs. As for Lawrence, 23 fantasy points last week, 51 passing attempts is super nice, but he was 28 for 51 and he had 3 picks. This is a really tough spot against the Broncos. I don't trust Josh Jacobs. He had 2 touchdowns, which saved his day in week 1. He was 10 for 32. He's on the sidelines a lot, dealing with the toe injury. He's not practicing. Kenyon Drake could be a sneaky little play. He had 5 grabs for 39 yards last week. Michael Pittman, both backs in Hines and Taylor were the leaders in targets. I don't trust Pittman. I don't trust any Colts wide receiver, especially against the Rams. And then Fuller, I'm not rolling out there in week 1 against the Bills. We'll take a quick break, and I got my top DFS plays for week 2. Keep her locked. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Going to talk a little DFS. Tomorrow we'll have imagine we're going to have Kyler Murray on the show. We're going to have Kyle Murray on the show. And Kyler, he may join us too. Who knows? Kyle is our top DFS guy over at FTNDaily.com. And we're going to talk a little bit about his projections and ownership projections and have a bigger DFS conversation tomorrow. But I wanted to touch on a couple of my top plays. Now, I do have Kyler Murray as one of my top plays. You know, just play this guy. Don't fade him. Just roll him out there. I feel like he's a guy that can get you 25, at least 25 DK points, flirt with 30, in the mid-30s like he did last week. 5 total touchdowns here against Minnesota. Jalen Hurts is in there against San Fran. Nick Chubb against, we have him against Houston. Joe Mixon against Chicago. Najee Harris against the Raiders. Keenan Allen against Dallas. Cooper Kupp against the Colts, Allen Robinson against Cincy, George Kittle, Noah Fant. And heck, if you want to roll out Kmet, because I butchered it last segment, I really do feel Cole Kmet this week and moving forward. I think he's a guy that's going to get targeted. 6 targets in 5 of his final 7 games. Let's roll through rapid fire on kind of what I'm thinking with some of these other players. For Kyler, I mean, he had the rushing touchdown last week. Certainly, he provides a nice rushing floor and the upside there to run one in. 10 rushing touchdowns in his first 9 games last season. Before he suffered that shoulder injury, he only had 1 rushing touchdown in the final 7 games. The sky's the limit for Kyler. Like, bet him MVP. Like, this guy is an absolute baller. I'm not breaking any news, but that's my top quarterback that I would spend money on. Jalen Hurts is another guy that I think is underpriced. There's 6 more quarterbacks with a higher price tag than him on DK. 264 yards last week, 3 touchdowns, 62 rushing yards. He had a 77 completion percentage, 334 rushing yards in 5 starts, at least 60 yards on the ground in 4 of those 5. In that one game that he did not play. The offensive line, we've talked about it enough on this show. It looks pretty good in Philadelphia. If you don't include the Week 17 game, a 70% completion rate, 278 yards passing per game, 8-to-2 touchdown to interception ratio, and 74 rushing yards per game is what he's averaging. Nick Chubb, 15 for 83 last week against the Chiefs, 2 touchdowns, even caught 2 passes. They're 12.5-point favorites against the Texans. Kareem Hunt is going to get in there. You can say whatever you want about Chubb not catching any passes. None of that matters to me. He's going to run a couple big ones against the Texans. 5.2 yards per carry last year, number 1. 24 touchdowns on the ground, number 2. And 70 40-yard runs against number 1, as well as the most rushing yards allowed in the league. Houston last week, that was a complete outlier. Joe Mixon, just volume and opportunity. 29 carries, 127 rushing yards, and 33 touches was the most of any running back last week. He is averaging 21 rushing attempts, 3.5 catches, and 24.7 touches in his last 7 games. Harris, don't worry about the numbers last week. 100% of the snaps. This is a really good spot against the Raiders. They go up 189 rushing yards last week, 5.6 yards per attempt, a league high. I know Lamar played. Also, Williams, though, a 4th-string running back, looked pretty good against them. He's in a really good spot. He had 2 targets inside the red zone as well. Keenan Allen, 13 games with Justin Herbert, 7 targets in every game but 2 he's played with Herbert. And the 2 games he didn't, he was hurt and he left. A really good game from him last week. He is averaging 12.5 targets per game in the 12 games with Herbert where he hasn't left. I didn't count the 2 where he left with an injury. You don't include those 2. This is a guy who's racked up 12.5 targets per game. And he is the 2nd best matchup according to our wide receiver cornerback tool over at ftndaily.com. And then Robinson and Kupp are just in really good spots. Take last week with a grain of salt against the Rams for Robinson. And then for Kupp, he does seem like he is Matthew Stafford's guy. And you saw DK and Lockett absolutely light up the Colts secondary last week. Kittle, just a fantastic spot against the Eagles. I think Slay could lock down Debo. And then Noah Fant in here. Noah Fant, he's going to be the big riser. We talk about Tim Patrick. Certainly his stock rises up a little bit here with the injury to Jerry Jeudy. But Noah Fant does as well. 8 targets last week, 6 catches, 62 yards, and 22 grabs on 33 targets in his last 4 games. Noah Fant is really good. And I think Teddy Bridgewater is going to lean on him quite a bit. All right, we didn't get to World Series yesterday in the show. We got a couple minutes here to wrap up today's show. We'll talk about a couple World Series odds and who I'm feeling here. Keep her locked. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on a Game Plus Network. Gonna just wrap things up here with World Series odds. We didn't really get to it yesterday, but I just wanted to touch on it. Maybe we could do it. We'll definitely do it again on this show as we get closer to just all the teams being locked in. Like when the season is over, we can certainly look at it, and we'll talk a lot of baseball throughout the playoffs as well. So the Dodgers are up at the top here at plus 290. The Astros plus 500. I'll tell you what, like these are two teams that I do not want to see in the World Series. I don't want to see them win. Like give me somebody else. The White Sox 7-1, the Brewers plus 850, Tampa plus 850, the Giants 11-1. We have Atlanta 13-1, the Yankees 14-1, the Jays 20-1. They have moved from 30 to 20. This is DK. BetMGM had him at 30 just 48 hours ago. Now they have him at like 16-1. Again, use the prop shop, get the best possible odds, and then the Red Sox at 30-1. I'm not gonna lie, the Red Sox at 30-1 are kind of interesting, to be honest with you. You know, Chris Sale is back, and I think he's coming off the COVID list this week. Like that would be a long shot that I would be willing to take. The Jays are very interesting as well, considering their bats. I will not bet on the Dodgers. I will not bet on the Astros. I don't like those odds. You know, the Giants, I have a 20-1 future on the Giants. Big John came in here after the All-Star break, and we talked about San Fran getting disrespected. At that time, they had the number 1 rotation. They were leading the league in slugging and home runs. They were right in top 5 in every single offensive metric that you can think of. And it looks like now there's still some games to be played here, but they are holding down that division as of right now, which would be strong. They're going to be a tough out. This is a team that's got a really good rotation. They can make a lot of contact. They got some vets on that squad who have won World Series rings. The Giants come up every few years, right? And they always find a way to just impress you when you doubt them. My bet, though, the team that I like the most out of all of these squads, the White Sox. I really like their rotation. I think it's pretty strong here. And it looks like the guys are getting healthy again. Carlos Rodon, Lance Lynn. There's some guys here. The bullpen, I think, is the best bullpen in baseball. And I really like their offense, you know, from the number 1 hitter in Tim Anderson all the way to the end, and Luis Garcia, who's, you know, just been pretty good lately over the past couple weeks. I know I kind of rapid fire through that last segment. We do have to get out of here. But the White Sox at 7-1 is a very interesting bet. And consider the Jays. As hot as their offense is, I know the bullpen has some struggles, but consider the Jays or the Red Sox some long shots, those teams that I think could really make some noise in the American League. I know they would have to go through the White Sox, but those are 3 teams that I'm certainly interested in. I think the AL is much stronger than the NL. It's top heavy in the NL. Dodgers aren't getting it done this year. They're not getting it done. All right, any questions as always at Chris Meaney. Enjoy the football game tonight. Giants cover, but Washington wins. Sorry, Tino. We'll be back tomorrow. Cheers.